Good day, everyone. Welcome to BritCham Digital Transformation Series webinar. Digital is your new front door, how to exploit and manage these new opportunities. I'm Asti, Events Coordinator at BritCham Indonesia. Today, we're going to discuss how businesses can more effectively market goods and services in the online environment. And joining us today are our three distinguished panelists: Tom West, Director of Island Media Management; Ilyas Bat, Chief Executive Officer of MadeInIndonesia.com; and last but not least, Kelvin Low, Regional Commercial Head ASEAN, Australia, Korea, and Japan of Cambridge Assessment English. This session will be moderated by Chris Wren, the Executive Director of BritCham Indonesia. And before we start, allow me to explain the functionality of this webinar. Please be informed that today's webinar is being recorded, and we will be able to share a link with you when it's available after the event is complete. All dial-in participants will be muted to avoid background noises that may distract you from listening to this webinar, and also to enable our panelists to present without interruption. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box at any time. It is at the bottom center of your screen. And we will have time for Q&A session at the end to answer your questions. Now I'm going to hand the screen over to Chris Wren, who is going to start today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Asti. A very good day to everybody. We have quite a large audience, and they are represented both in Indonesia, so it's good afternoon to you, and also in the UK, where it's a good morning to our UK guests. BritCham has been putting on a number of webinars over the last few weeks. We've deliberately avoided talking about COVID-19 per se, and instead our focus has been remained on the challenges that have been facing our members and stakeholders from a commercial sense. And certainly the challenges of having needed to accelerate the digital advancement of the business has been one that everybody has talked about. Last week we talked about the cybersecurity challenges with moving to various digital platforms in a hurry. And today we're looking at the issue of marketing, because digital has now become your new front door. No meetings, no gatherings in the usual formats. And like with everything that's new, there are challenges, but there are also opportunities. And our focus really will be on how to exploit and how to manage these new opportunities. I won't read through the CVs or bios of my guests today, who are Tom West, Director of Island Media Management, of Ilyas Bat, CEO of Made in Indonesia, and Kelvin Low, Regional Commercial Head of Cambridge Assessment Center. I apologize. I won't read out the bios because you've had those already, and I don't want to use our valuable time. We have received some really good and interesting and relevant questions from some of you in advance. We'll do our very best to work through them. Some are quite similar, so I'll be bundling those together. And our format today really is for Tom to be doing a little bit of scene setting for us with regards to this particular topic, and also to delve in some recent corporate experience that they have had with one of their clients. And I think with that, the only other thing to restate from Asti is the opportunity for you, as things occur to you, to please use the question and answer box, and we'll be pulling things off there and posing them to our guests during the rather more conversational chat show style interaction in the latter part of this webinar. With that, it gives me great pleasure to hand over the floor, or should I say the screen, to Tom West, Director of Island Media Management.
Well, hey, thank you, Chris. Also, thanks to Asti and Ronnie for putting together and managing our webinar today. So obviously there are a lot of operational and communication variables that have either changed or been introduced to our marketing environment due to COVID-19. Not that we dwell on that as a subject, but the global macro environment is certainly shaped by that right now. That's pretty much universally agreed. So we'll focus today on the aspects of digital transformation from a marketing perspective, and our panel has insights from different perspectives of dealing with our environment and making plans for the midterm as things develop. I think it makes sense to kind of look at everything chronologically, so we can maybe have a look at how things are going right now, and then what businesses might do as a rule of thumb or rules of thumb to assess things or make plans for what things might look like over the next 6, 12, 18 months, again, with regard to changing digitally. So I think just to set the scene, I'll relay an anecdote of a business who I think is particularly agile. And agility and adaptability are traits I think that we'll see in successful businesses over the midterm. As new challenges come in, adaptability is going to be something that comes to the forefront. A business that we've worked with in the past, and all of the change that I'll speak about here is completely their doing. So not to take any credit away from them. It's a business called Bali Safe that works primarily with food safety, occupational health and safety, drawing from international experience, relocated here, landed, got set up, everything legal, and started really working with tourism and hospitality providers to make sure chefs are running safe kitchens, trying to get rid of this whole image of Bali belly and so on. And then guess what? A couple of months later, bam. Okay, so now a product and a service that's very much hands-on, very much in person, and very much in the tourism industry, kind of a double whammy, gets set back. And they take stock and they say, well, what are we good at? We're good with communications. We've built presentations and slide decks for decades. So how can we deliver a product to people that already know us? And they come up with COVID Safe. So it's a way for them to draw on their strengths, assess some of the operational liabilities that they have in the business with what's going on, come up with a new product that enables them to take advantage of the situation, or rather present things in a light that is going to help their clients meet their objectives, take the local regulations, and actually apply them into the working environment. So the connection there is again with agility, and we have to take a look at our marketing plans and maybe look at some of the costs that you thought were sunk for the year, and see about how you can make smart adaptations to your marketing and your messaging in order to make sure that the audience you thought was going to be in a certain place is still there, that the message is still appropriate, and that the goods and services that you're trying to market are still in demand. So in order to set the scene, I think the scene that we're looking at is one of changing variables, and it will be the businesses who are able to identify those variables and make adaptations that will prove to be the most successful in the midterm. And as the scene is set, I'll pass that back over to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Tom. What we have with our panel today are people representing businesses in that are different. Tom's company is the consulting company that is providing guidance and support in the marketing space, and in particular with the digital focus. Then we've got Kelvin's company, who prior to COVID was already starting to put a lot of their offerings online. And what COVID's done is to perhaps accentuate the focus of the online. And then Ilias, this is a company that's relatively new to market, still in the process of launch, that was always designed to be digital only before COVID. So first of all, I'd like to bring in Kelvin, if I may. Kelvin, please tell us a little bit about the approach of Cambridge Assessment English. Perhaps share with us why prior to COVID you had taken the digital and online route, and what has changed since.
Yeah, thank you everyone for having me here. I want to thank Chris and for organizing this session. So I'll talk a bit about how we serve the market in a digital manner. As you probably know, I'm from with a Cambridge Assessment. We are a 150-year-old company, and we are part of the University of Cambridge, which is an 800-year-old institution. So if there's a term that describes us, an ultra-traditional company, I think we'll fit the bill, right? Because most of you guys will probably think of us as running paper exams, physical classroom, having schools and teachers, and having a lot of hard copy books and materials. But having said that, if you just Google now, the skills needed for this decade and what employers are actually looking for in their employees, according to survey from World Economic Forum and LinkedIn, the top 2 skills that they are looking at is thinking and problem solving skill as one, and the second is a communicative skill. So in Cambridge Assessment, we not only have the tools and product to assess these 2 skills, whether in a school setting or in a corporate entity for companies to assess their employees, we are able to deliver it virtually and using AI technology. So let me expand a little bit about how we embrace this AI technology. One of the features of this AI technology is to make our tests adaptive. Because in a normal test environment, all the candidates will have the same test paper. So imagine if you're a candidate and if the first few questions is very difficult, you basically give up the whole paper, right? But with this feature that we incorporate with AI technology, the system is able to generate different test questions to different candidates at the same time to test their level. So once the candidate cleared the level, the question will go up to the next more difficult level. So it's really testing candidates at their level and making them confident and comfortable with the test, so that the test will gradually test and push the candidate to the level that up to the limit. So we are able to personalize a group test, right? And we are able to make the test enjoyable and motivating. So I think that's the essence of where we are coming from, to make our tests relevant and also making our tests as comfortable, as enjoyable as possible. I know it's quite a difficult word to describe tests being enjoyable, but that's what we are trying to do. And the second part about AI technology that we incorporate is using AI marker. So we have done a lot of research so as to calibrate the system so that it's able to mark the candidate at our highest standard. So again, this is using a lot of, so we have spent a lot of time and resources researching on this for the past few years. And one advantage that it can bring to the market is a faster turnaround in terms of the result. Imagine you do an exam today, you may only receive your result script 1 month or 2 months later. But with incorporating this AI technology, we are able to basically generate the result almost instantaneously, right? And the third and last bit about this AI technology is proctoring software. So because of this COVID-19, everybody is locked down, locked in the office. Locked at home, cannot go to the office. So we use proctoring software to basically invigilate the test taker remotely, anywhere, everywhere they are. So, and with this technology that is able to help us record the test session, uploading the test session to the server, and using the AI technology to pick up or identify any cheating or anomalies. So you may see us as a company that is very traditional in a normal sense, but we have been staying ahead of the game, to monitor the future trend. And so this is, I'm glad to say that as a company, we are able to think ahead, and so we managed to push ahead. But I'm not saying that we don't have difficulties during this COVID-19. Of course, it is, I think, it threw a lot of people off guard, and there's a lot of challenges. Maybe I can share this a little bit more in a later session. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Calvin. So yes, very traditional Cambridge, using a lot of forward thinking and a lot of modern technology, much of which will have been the output of research from universities as well, AI included. But you were already on the track with this before COVID, as you mentioned, to improve the experience, to improve the output, and COVID has simply provided, I believe what you're saying, more opportunity for people as they are, as you say, not locked up in their offices. Is anyone locked up in their office? No. Locked up in your homes.
Locked at home, yeah.
Yeah, with a lot more time on your hands and an opportunity to think through what you might actually want to do in a productive way with your time. I'd now like to bring in Ilyas. Ilyas's project currently is something that's far from traditional. This is an organization, made in Indonesia.com, and Kelvin's had 15 years of entrepreneurial experience and background in a range of companies and across a number of disciplines, including luxury brand management, business entrepreneurship, and so on. But the Made in Indonesia is Ilyas's vision, and he is the visionary co-founder. It is Indonesia's first B2B global e-commerce platform, and it's been exclusively designed for business-to-business sourcing and procurement from Indonesia. Of particular interest to a number of the guests who are on this particular webinar, who have an interest in export-import trade relationships and so on. Ilyas, I'm sure that you can do madeinindonesia.com a lot more justice, and I'll hand over to you to just explain to everybody the inspiration behind this and where you are in the development from concept to launch.
So much, Chris. I'm sorry for my audio. I hope I'm audible. There are some difficulties I'm experiencing right now. Good afternoon to everybody. Let me take a step back and mention about a lot has been discussed so far about these, and I think indeed COVID-19 is threatening both our health and business. And speaking of business in particular, global businesses have been affected at various degrees, depending on the sectors. Our society at this point of time, how we live or how we are conducting business, trade, commerce, is being redefined as we speak. So if we look at Indonesian perspective at this point of time, Indonesian economic growth is expected to plunge to 2.3%, and in worst case scenario to 0.4%. That would obviously have devastating effects in years to come. I believe it's high time for Indonesian businesses in particular, especially manufacturers, small and medium enterprises, to enact resilient long-term digital transformation and e-commerce adoption, creating digital experiences and digital innovation strategies, paying very close attention to the consumer behavior, and accelerate digital innovative solutions that would be acting as a driving force.
But I think for now, if I could move on and perhaps focus on Tom first of all. Tom, as the consultant and the advisor, and I'm sort of drawing on inspiration from some questions that we have had come in. A smaller or medium-sized business that's been used to doing things rather more traditionally,
yep.
that still needs to obviously drive revenue, but now having to drive revenue in marketing territory that's relatively unfamiliar to them. How would you begin that conversation with them, Tom, in terms of switching over their knowledge and experience base to the digital way of doing things?
Yep, good question. I think if I I kind of have a few examples in the back of my head, and if I could take this question and frame it in the context of an example of a business, that might help paint a little bit more clear picture. So if we picture, let's say, a successful small to medium sized law firm, maybe in Jakarta or wherever, and you look at their website, and it certainly, it paints the picture that somebody told them about the internet in 2003, and now they've got a website, and they've had the same one for 17 years. And maybe they're at the cutting edge of their practice in terms of law. And the way they show their success is by having the best office, and they drive the Range Rover or the Mercedes, but their website looks like a 1988 Toyota Corolla. So now people can't see your fancy office. People can't see your Range Rover. What they see, if they need to look for service and they haven't been given a recommendation word of mouth, is they look online, because they have to. They're working from home, they're spending time at home. Now, maybe that's not your client, but what it does is it allows other people to creep in and get more market share. So the people that adapt will either protect or gain more market share. So that's an example of a small business. And for what they invest in their client relationships, the fact that they accept their brand to be tarnished by poor digital representation and having a crummy website up there, and they haven't sorted out their social or Google properties. You're talking of an investment maybe like 20 million rupiah, and if anything, it's there to protect their brand. It's there to protect their market share, especially in a time like this where people maybe are reluctant to meet face to face. Maybe they need to find you online. So I hope that example maybe addresses the question appropriately.
It has, Tom. And what about the question of cost? We're in an environment now where businesses are facing a downturn in revenue. They're trying their best to be loyal to their teams. They have their fixed overheads, which will be very, very difficult to alleviate it in the short term. How resource guzzling is this financially to make this switch?
That's a good question as well. And it has to do with the scale of the business. It has to do with what your target market is. But in order to do, something simple like, let's make sure that our website is modern and is in accordance with our brand, and all it is to tell your story, to say, hey, we're here, this is what we do, super cheap. You should be able to find somebody to design it for you for 15, 20 million for something fairly simple, contact form, that kind of thing. But that money doesn't need to come necessarily out of your back pocket. If you have advertising in place, out of home advertising, print advertising, untrackable advertising, where people aren't going to have, it's not going to have the readership. It's not going to have the views that you thought it was going to whenever you thought you were going to buy it. Maybe those are things that can be renegotiated. Maybe you can look into what you thought were previously agreed sunk costs and reallocate in a way that allows you to, one, if you're working from home, certain aspects of your operations maybe aren't consuming a lot of your time, then maybe it's time to upskill part of your workforce, part of your marketing department, to say, hey, it's the 21st century. We're 20 years into the 21st century. Let's make sure that we're competent with this digital stuff. Let's go ahead and get somebody to set up a Google Ads campaign and experiment with it and figure out how it works. Or if you're a larger size firm and you're still living in the 20th century, it's a good way for you to take this and say, right, I was maybe I was in the C-suite, or maybe I was in charge of marketing and I was, on the second to the top floor, and my job was great. It was ticking over. I wasn't going to take any risks. I got this all the time with hotel GMs. I got to grow by X% every year. I don't need to take any risks. Doesn't matter. Well, now's a good chance for you to step out of that shell and say, I can learn myself. I can take steps for the business to move it into the 21st century. I knew this stuff needed to happen, but now I have a chance to do it in an environment where I can further my career rather than expose myself to risk. That institutional careerism is a real thing, and it holds a lot of businesses back. This is a chance to get out of that.
Okay, so really what you're presenting is there are two opportunities. One are to save costs and redirect those costs. And the other issue...
Sorry to interrupt you, Chris. There's another one here, which is if you look at all of your competitors in your industry, everybody's hitting the brakes on advertising. that can make sense. Let's say tourism. It makes sense to maybe stop Google ads, for example. If there are no flights, you're going to get no bookings. Makes total sense. But if everybody just blanket stops every type of advertising, stops every type of digital effort, there are mid to long term kind of semi-durable investments you can make, like search engine optimization. That's more or less a zero-sum game with your competition. If you can move yourself up in the rankings while everyone else is wondering what they're doing, or they're cutting people, they're cutting content writers, then when things return, you're going to have a better share of those search results. You're going to get better organic traffic as a result. That's a good investment, depending on what your business is. Or some property owners might take this opportunity to reinvest in the physical renovation of their property. Well, why not look at your digital properties as a renovation project as well? There's some mindset changes there, but just saying, hey, cut all costs, maybe puts you in the same bucket with everybody else that's making the same mistake.
Okay, so it's not just cutting costs, it's cutting costs and then redirecting the focus to the newer opportunities, yeah? And those newer opportunities are the digital platforms, and also the learning and development of the individuals themselves that are perhaps not as familiar as others are, as to how to exploit those opportunities. I'd like to welcome back Ilyas. I'm sorry we lost you earlier, Ilyas. You were introducing the philosophy behind madeinindonesia.com. Perhaps you'd just like to pick up from where we lost you.
So I was just giving a bit of perspective in terms of where we are with respect to COVID-19 and what all businesses ought to do in general. And at the macro perspective, I was just mentioning about our small and medium enterprise businesses in Indonesia. They need to be more resilient in terms of digital transformation, in terms of economic adoption, e-commerce adoptions, so that they are more prepared for a post-COVID-19 era. And having said that, I think we are not gone. It would be a new normal. And technology, e-commerce, which has the past 2 decades, has merely been more expedited, and it has somehow the COVID-19 has acted more of a catalyst in terms of the adoption at this point of time.
I would like to
maybe I can jump in here.
Yeah, please do, Calvin.
Yeah. I think I echo what Tom and Ilyas has shared briefly, because we need to remind ourselves, even without this crisis, we're actually in the 4th industrial revolution, right? And according to data that I've gathered, World Economic Forum, is half-life of a learned skill. What it means is that it suggests that a skill learned today can only last you half a lifetime, right? I mean, my dad is a bus driver for his entire life. But imagine now a bus driver, you're talking about in 10 years' time, the whole transportation system will be driverless, right? So not only individual is we have to adapt, but business too, right? We talk about traditional banks being replaced by fintech, cryptocurrency, blockchain, Alipay, so on and so forth, right? So not only jobs will disappear, but companies will be gone, right? So it's actually about survival. So I think to me is if this 4th industrial revolution then cause us to act, how we can serve our market better, we have to take this crisis as a wake-up call, because we have to think, 5 to 10 years ahead, what is the marketplace like, and whether do we have the product that suit the marketplace, what is the customer buying experience, so on and so forth. So we have to, I think a few points I'd like to share is we have to think of online as expanding your sales channel. So I hear that, like for small media enterprise, I think Tom has shared briefly that the cost is not exorbitant, right? So we just, for a small media enterprise, I know every dollar count, but you sometimes have to think that expanding online is actually trying to expand your footprint, your coverage to the marketplace, and then to expand your sales channel. And the second thing is making sure that don't just stop there, right? So for small, medium, and enterprise, you have to think of, you need to have the right resources, the right personnel, and then you need to have a innovation mindset, because at the end of the day is to test and learn and to start small, right? You don't have to be in a big scale, right? Just test small and then slowly expand on your online presence, right? So it could be from information sharing to online e-commerce portal. So you can really scale up the different e-commerce system that you can embark on, right? And the third thing is making sure that you integrate your customer management, your processes, your system, right? Making sure that if you're in a retail business and then you go online, is to make sure that the customers, you should be able to recognize your online customers that appear in your offline store, right? So enable to give them a good user experience. And I think the fourth point is about, data. At the end of the day, this world is about collating data and measuring data, right? I think Jack Ma ever said this, right? We are moving from IT to DT time, right? And in DT, it's not meaning digital time, but he means data, right? Data is king now. So maybe one word of advice for whatever small, medium enterprises, companies, is it's not about moving from offline to online, but is to ensure that you have this omni-channel to have online and offline. So it's not one replacing the other.
Yes, Tom.
I'm happy to follow on a little bit to that. Certainly in my experience, we're a little bit of an oddball in our industry as an integrated marketing consulting firm, because we come from a digital first background, and we met with the Bali Hotels Association. It's been 6 years ago now. We presented data about the allocation of spending in terms of physical ads, print, out of home, compared with digital. And we compared that with what was happening in North America and Europe in the early 2000s. And it showed we were sort of 12 to 15 years behind the curve in terms of digital adoption. And this is where what you say from data being king, the message here is trackability. You can make informed, statistically sound decisions if you have data. If you just say, well, 1 million people drive by this billboard every day. Yeah, guys on their motorbike that are going to a building site, that's not your target market. Those aren't your customers. So this will enable, basically now everyone's audience is forced to be online. So this forces businesses to go online and dip their toe in the water, and finally they'll see, oh, all right, I can see where that rupiah went and how the rupiah came back to me. Now it's all transparent. I think it's going to be a great thing for companies to finally see where their money is going and how they're making their money back.
Okay, thanks very much, Tom. Kelvin, education has been a sector that's obviously has been challenged more than any other. Virtually everything now has been put online. As you mentioned, the pedigree of your organization is Cambridge University, and they are the first to have announced, or the first in the UK to have announced that the whole 2021 will be delivered online from their point of view. Through the different layers of the education industry, from young children going through to middle and high school, what do you see as the transition for and opportunities maybe for schools generally going forward? Or is this really one of those not win-wins but lose-lose if you're a parent and a pupil?
No, I think I'm sure we have heard of this concept called flipped classroom. I think the concept is about a lot of time, a student go to school to learn, and after school, they do their homework and so on and so forth, right? But in a flipped classroom concept, it is about learning at home and then practicing in school, right? So I believe that we need to really invest a lot of research and also solution and also the online portal to make sure that we can make learning at home fun, right? So in a situation where students cannot go to school, how do we continue the learning? So this is not an easy answer. I won't say we have I won't say anybody has a solution, but I really think that we should expand on this concept to make learning fun, right? How do we make learning fun at home? So of course, in a developed world and a developing world, it's also very challenging. I think in a developed world, we talk about, like for example, in the States or in UK, you talk about home-based learning. Most of families, they have computers at home. Students still have access to some form of learning. And then, but in a developing world, some countries I hear that they don't even have electricity, and don't talk about having a computer, right? So the only opportunity that how do we deliver learning to a developing world? There are talk about maybe through the TV channel, right? Different TV channel to different levels and different subjects. So there's even talk about in some of the countries trying to deliver their learning, to the mainstream TVs. So, but I think having said that, it is really to invest a lot of the resources to make sure that we can bring the learning to the students at home in a fun manner, and making sure that they continue to learn. So I think that is the challenge that most countries are facing right now, and we are all trying to find a solution to that.
Thanks, Kelvin. So the message is to develop things that are fun, that keep children engaged and interested and inquiring. Tom, going now to the hospitality and tourism industry, as I mentioned a few questions. This is an industry that was already very much online and using digital approaches through the different ticketing platforms and booking platforms and so on. For that particular industry to kickstart itself again, is it just going back to what they were doing, or is there a newer strategic approach where there should have been lessons learned during this fallow period?
Yeah, that's a big question you've got there. I think that every property owner, whether from mom and pop operations, small inns, all the way up to some of the corporates, need to take stock of what their opportunities really are here. I think that given how competitive the online travel agent, the OTA market was before this, I think we'll see some shakeup there, perhaps some consolidation. If this goes on for 6, 12, 18 or more months, I mean, you could have a complete reopening. You could even say the flight schedules are returned to normal, but are we going to go back to 90% full flights? Are people willing to travel and sit in there? I think that the industry as a whole is gonna face a lot of challenges, and I think that that the businesses that are able to show that they're on top of it, that they're making responsible decisions and so on, are going to be the ones that do well. I'm forever an optimist, but I think that is a particular industry that needs to look at investing in long-term solutions, at getting themselves more runway, controlling costs, making smart investments in how their brand is represented online, making sure that they're in a position to take direct bookings whenever interest in tourism does come back, so that they can make that 15 to 20% back from the OTAs. That's kind of the broad stroke. Obviously, there's a lot of diversity in the hospitality industry, so those are the general rules of thumb that I could throw out there.
Yeah, I want to add, I think this, if you talk about tourism industry, it's not something that you can say that it will be switched on, right? Post-COVID, everything will recover, everything will be back to normal. But maybe there's opportunity to look at virtual reality. I mean, imagine somebody putting on a kind of a goggle, and then imagine that they are right there in Japan or in any country that they want. So if you talk about, is there an area for business to evolve, to change? Maybe we can look at virtual reality, but the traditional way of tourism industry is still, it will be quite challenging. You know, in Singapore, we have 4 terminals, you know, and the government is closing the 2 terminals. And then not just, even post-COVID, for 6 months, 12 months, they don't expect the tourism numbers to come back as per, you know, instantaneously. But I'm sure there are other ways, you know, we can look at, you know, if we will require some entrepreneur to come up with some new ideas, you know, to see how people can imagine they are touring or going on a tour, right?
Yeah, perhaps we don't need to go on a holiday, Calvin. Perhaps we just holiday virtually in front of our screen. It's very, very cheap. It's very, very safe, isn't it? Okay,
Yeah.
so the whole concept's got to be reinvented. Ilyas, you're back. Did you get my question before?
I got it partly. I'm sorry. I think I was experiencing some problems. I hope it works this time.
Okay, so just for me to ask them in a slightly faster, quicker format, 2 parts to the question. Number one is, if you're online selling, how do you stop yourself looking like everybody else? How do you differentiate? Okay, and secondly is, how do you propose to get the UK stakeholders to know that all these Indonesian parties have got products and services that they want to sell and export?
Sure. First of all, let me just give you a bit of perspective in terms of madeinindonesia.com. As rightly mentioned by you, we are Indonesia's first B2B international marketplace or e-commerce platform. Traditionally, if you see in Indonesia, there is a lot of retail C2C based business model based platforms like Tokopedia, Bukalapak, and many others which are selling domestically at this point of time. So we are one of the very few marketplaces. Other marketplaces are there, a couple of them, but all of them are doing international trading in bits and pieces. We're trying to do it on a more consolidated way, representing 9 industries, over 900 different product categories within Indonesia. So we're looking at, first of all, capturing the market which is already there. If you look at Indonesian exports, we are experiencing over $170 billion trade on a yearly basis, where majority of that is still offline at certain points. It's not, there is not a marketplace or a fully end-to-end digitalized platform that is available for either Indonesian sellers and suppliers to conduct the global transactions or global trade, and for international buyers, sourcing agents to source or procure with safety, security, trust, and transparency. So I think there is an underlying business market where we are trying to capture a certain value from both buyer and seller side. And what we are bringing on the table is a marketplace that is built up by design to conduct end-to-end business transactions, B2B transactions on wholesale, at least a container, half a container order value size. So if you look at this point of time, how our small and medium enterprise market looks like, we have over 700,000 to 800,000 small and medium enterprise, out of which you would be surprised to know that is around 20%. Again, there are various data, but overall in an average is 20% that are actually digitalized at this point of time. And when I say digitalized, they are not really encapsulating the economic viability. They are not really adapting the e-commerce. The number of the percentage of small and medium enterprise that's actually active in e-commerce is only 9%. That means 91% is still there, which have not yet adopted Act 2 e-commerce strategies in order to sell their product offering either domestically or in international markets. So I think what we are offering are three very vital elements to conduct business-to-business trade within Indonesia and especially overseas. That is access to greater markets for our sellers and suppliers with varying scale and sizes of businesses, access to credit and financing through our various channel partners, and access to various technology, trade, and marketing solutions that will help our Indonesian sellers to globalize their product offering, get connected to global value chain, B2B value chain. And at the same time, if there are potential buyers and sourcing agents who otherwise are sourcing from Indonesia anyway, but through series of broker chains, or they are sourcing through different countries rather than directly from the manufacturer, they would be much more comfortable in terms of conducting transactions directly with the manufacturers. So I think as a marketplace, we are looking at both buyer and seller-centric marketplace, and there are various multi-tier strategies on marketing and promotional strategies that we are putting in place in terms of communicating with potential buyers and companies that are conducting transactions within Indonesia in the past as well. And we are backed with a lot of market intelligence, data intelligence on trade and transactions. And our strategy is not to use a shotgun approach by going just through social media and other avenues in terms of promoting ourselves, but rather targeted approach in terms of understanding the underlying requirement and business requirements, e-commerce strategy of the various companies within Indonesia, and somehow use that as a targeted approach to locate, identify, engage with the consumer base, the customer base from various countries, depending on how aggressive the Indonesian company is in terms of pursuing how many markets overseas, or if they want to take even baby steps in terms of experimenting with 1 or 2 countries in the beginning. And I think my last word is, in terms of conducting a global transaction, I think it is true before COVID, and it's true now, the biggest challenge remains trust. And that is true for both online and offline. And I think we as a marketplace are bringing all those suite of services and features together, covering almost all the B2B touch points that will enable our Indonesian manufacturers to sell with speed, sell globally, and increase their brand recognition, and at the same time ensuring the buyer side to have a safe, secure, transparent, and a broker-free kind of an environment in terms of conducting the transaction at a mid-scale or large scale as well.
Ilyas, I'm just going to continue with you because I'm frightened of losing you again. So while it's looking so good, I'll take advantage. Has your strategy changed at all with the COVID experience? Have you found that you have had more demand from SMEs from your proposition, or has there been a reluctance?
Well, the answer is definitely there has been a more demand. Of course, we are seeing that there are manufacturers or small and medium enterprise at this point of time who are more keen in terms of understanding that what all it needs and what it takes to globalize their business, and is it expensive, what are the first steps, how much involvement our platform has. And I think to give you a straight answer on that, I think there has been a tremendous demand increase in terms of inquiries, in terms of onboarding as well, to be very straightforward as well. And not only from small and medium enterprise, even some big companies which are very good domestically as well, want to somehow experiment in terms of understanding the global buying patterns and how they can find new customer bases as well outside Indonesia as well.
Thanks, Ilyas. So I think really you are emphasizing Tom's point earlier that there will be experienced people who are taking advantage now to experiment, experience businesses and find out other ways of diversifying how they market. Tom, there's a question come in relation to people development, and I address this to you and invite Kelvin also into it. What do you believe are the soft skills that people should be focusing on right now while they have the time and the opportunity? And which strategic, or rather, what strategies should they be looking to improve?
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the question there, Mrs. Mundi. In terms of soft skills, you specify for the services industry. So it would depend on what your service is. If you're engaged in something that's easy to remote, like consulting or psychology, somewhere where you're dealing traditionally face to face, but that didn't involve like a physical push of any sort of product, then you'd want to develop yourself in terms of maybe getting promotional videos out there, YouTube advertising, showcasing the fact that you can do these sorts of services remotely, getting yourself really strong and proficient at developing slide decks. So getting good at PowerPoint or a similar tool. And then in terms of strategies, I would say make sure that you are going with something that's transparent and trackable. Go ahead and make sure that you're putting out a clear and compelling message to people that shows right off the bat what the value of that service is. But if it's a service industry or a service specifically that you're offering that makes it really difficult to remote, maybe it's just a time where you can focus on kind of an upskilling phase, learning more about some of the digital marketing tools that are available out there, specializing in Google Ads or social media management. I'm not sure if that helps to address your question, but that's the best I got from the text of the question there.
Calvin, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think at this time we are talking about dressing up your, your resume, your experience, so on and so forth, right? So I think at the end of the day is what we have gathered is from the research that we have gathered from whether it's a World Economic Forum or LinkedIn. I think it's a lot about having employees that have the right thinking skill, problem solving skills, and also the communicative skills. So these are what the employers are looking for. And why are they looking for this is because it will help the companies expand their market share, right? So you're not just talking about serving the Indonesian market, you want to increase your footprint to the regional market. So these are the skills that are needed so that you are able to help the companies push the frontier. So yeah, my short answer to that is it's really about having the right skill that what employers are looking for. So if you have that, then you're good to go.
Okay, thanks very much. Tom mentioned that people wouldn't abandon one way that they've been doing things for the e-way or the digital way. Do you have any sense, Tom, of where the balance is for certain types of businesses or certain types of sector between digital and traditional?
I think very mature businesses, very mature industries are traditionally slow to adapt. I think that you'll find that this will force them to adapt maybe more. I think people will start to expand what demographics they've traditionally targeted online, because perhaps more older consumers that used to go down the street to get their stuff, now they've had a couple of months of shopping online, and people start to expand their targeting for their digital advertising. Part of that also means that they've got to change their messaging for that older demographic that they can now track and trace through digital advertising online. And in terms of industries or sectors, I think it's difficult to go into any real meaningful depth in that. It's such a broad thing to look at. I think it's pretty pessimistic for international tourism for the midterm. I think that's a fact of the matter. I think local businesses, local engagement, making sure that people are able to find you on Google Maps. These simple steps, I think every business should be taking that.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much for that. I noticed one of our attendees did make a very valid point that the challenges that Ilyas was facing right now, in fact, is a challenge that's nationwide, and that is that the development of digital infrastructure is not as well developed as it should be, and hence will impact how the country can move forward in terms of its own digital footprint. What would you say to that, Ilyas?
I will have a slightly long answer. I think addressing small and medium enterprise, especially in Indonesia, because I believe that our 4,000-5,000 corporations which are in Indonesia, they are more equipped, they have more digital resources or even financial resources to adapt various technologies. But I would like to, through your medium, communicate to our audience that digital transformation is not limited to Fortune 500. I think small and medium enterprises can very well transform their businesses at their own scale and size digitally, and if not all, but at least parts of it, bringing efficiency and innovation in terms of their processes, business processes. Very evident, and what is a very pressing question at this point of time is that in the post-COVID environment, post-COVID era, how well how little our small and medium enterprises are prepared for a market environment that will be predominantly, majorly technology driven. So I think at the same time, it is very difficult and challenging for small businesses to adapt or to do change management because they have to keep on producing the products as well as satisfying the consumer requirements with very limited resources. That is where we are trying to take over sort of and telling our small and medium enterprise that you do what you do best, that is to produce your products, and in terms of technology, trade and marketing solutions, will take care of it almost with a very negligible or zero cost. And I think the greater risk at this point of time, that would be my last word, is not really only the digital adaptation, but I think for our Indonesian perspective, I would say it is more inability to change. And I think the companies, the entrepreneurs who are understanding the ever-changing consumer patterns, or understanding the new trends that are emerging in the market, or trying to stay together with the rhythm of changing dynamics post-COVID, will be the companies that will be successful. And please, after this conference call, if someone is interested to communicate, to find out more in terms of what we can do and what we can offer in terms of technology, trade, how to conduct exports, how to sell B2B, even in domestic market, please feel free to contact me or one of my colleagues.
Okay, thanks, Ilyas. And so for me to start to draw a few common elements to the points made by each of you, it should not be regarded necessarily as a cost and expensive to shift to digital ways of doing things. The message is to have a look at what you have been doing. How effective are they in this new era? Can you redirect that cost and therefore create a new opportunity and a new focus? It is definitely very important to use this time to invest in education and personal development. And I think that would be a message that should be thrown out to everybody, not just corporate owners and executives, but every single employee, team member should perhaps be looking at their own portfolio of personal assets and thinking, just what do I add to this organization, and does my organization need different things of me right now as well. For organizations that tend to be risk averse in terms of trying out new things and moving away from the traditional, the message seems to be this is a great opportunity to experiment with very, very little risk associated to that experiment. And so they would certainly be key messages. I'd be very, very interested to know from Ilyas in 2 or 3 or 4 months' time to what extent that statistic of 91% and 9%, only 9% exploiting e-commerce, has changed over the 6 or 9 months of the COVID experience. My sense would be fairly significantly, but let's see, and perhaps that's another conversation. But before I close, I'd just like to invite any quick closing remark or point that you'd like to emphasize or re-emphasize. First of all, from Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, in closing for us, thanks again for having me on. I think that one of the things Ilyas mentioned in the first kind of pre-briefing that we had for this webinar, he said that the technology is going to be the backbone that holds everything together and helps all of us move forward. And I think he absolutely hit the nail on the head there. I think that businesses have been forced in this environment to turn to technology, one, to communicate internally. You know, how do we manage some of our processes when we can't go down the hall and talk to people and so on? How do we communicate with our clients? And I think it just forces everything. It's a huge push in the digital direction. And I think that those businesses that move ahead of their competition will be the ones that are most successful. Now is the time to adapt. That's it for me.
Thank you. Calvin?
Thanks.
I'll say that this crisis is really unprecedented. There's no past occurrence, and there's no books to say how we can recover from this crisis that we are facing right now, because it's not just affecting demand, it's also affecting supply, right? But I think as I said earlier, we have to, and I also echo what Tom and Ilyas shared. We just have to be agile and nimble. And the new world that we are facing right now, not just this crisis, but we are also in the 4th industrial revolution. So we really have to change our business model, because you have to think of the generation that we are serving is we are in an area of in a generation of convenience. So this generation is so used to convenience, having information, everything in their fingertips. And you're talking about, they have no concept about going out to buy the food, right? It's all about everything, just a few touch of their, the screen or, their smartphone, and the order will be at their doorstep. So I would say we really have to take this opportunity to think through. And whatever we do here, one advice is start small, yeah? And also getting the right personnel to be there, and be ready to innovate, to start small, and to be agile. Yeah.
Thank you, Calvin. Ilyas?
Again, my message is for Indonesian manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors, especially the small and medium enterprise of Indonesia. As we all know that COVID-19 is acting as a catalyst in terms of pushing a speedy digital transformation, because people are forced to adapt the current digital ecosystems. And it will stay so after we are going back, and there will be a new normal. And we hope that majority of the Indonesian businesses would adapt and use, capitalize, not only just being digital, but getting an economic viability from it and transforming their business, adapting and capitalizing from e-commerce business. All over the world, if you look at 65% of the complete transactions of purchases worldwide are happening through Alibaba, Amazon, and eBay. So it's a reality. We're not talking about some fantasy technology innovation in the future. This is happening. I hope that our Indonesian companies that we represent and we want to represent will not fall far behind. And I think what I worry is that if Indonesian businesses in general are not creative or innovative enough, it would be very hard for Indonesian SMEs to survive this century. I hope that there will be adaptation, there will be small, because there is so much intelligence, so much knowledge available out there. And I hope through this medium as well, it will serve as one of the mediums to help communicate the problems and also proposing solutions through your medium. And I thank you for giving this opportunity.
Thank you very much. And we thank you very much for joining us. Just to mention that our panelists are keen and willing to answer some of the questions that perhaps we just didn't have time to address specifically or indeed address at all. Thanks for putting those questions in, and we will share them with the panel, and perhaps they can enter into a dialogue with you. My team will also share with you how to contact them at their respective businesses as well. As far as BritCham goes, we'll continue with our webinar series. We're looking at renewable energy versus more traditional energy post-COVID. We're looking at the business of football coming up, and also the relationship of the territory of Hong Kong with the Southeast Asia region as well. They're just 3 opportunities that will be coming your way over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Once again, we've had an awful lot of non-members as well who have joined us on this particular webinar, which is great to see. You're very, very welcome as our guests. And forewarned, my team will be chatting with you when we're the other side of all of this to try and get you on board as members and sharing the great value proposition that is to be a member of BritCham. That's just one of your opportunities that you can exploit going forward. Thanks very much, Tom, Kelvin, Ilyas, to my team, Asti and Rani, to all of you for sharing your time with us this afternoon in Indonesia and this morning in the UK. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.